and the team says hold positions, I want to see him snap and just be like, no, I did it for Danny. I'm taking this win from this kid. Like, I just,
Aw.
you know,
Feral Lando would be a thing to behold.
I'm Caroline,
I'm Cristina.
and this is Gravel Trap F1,
It was our first dry race in Japan since 2018,
which gave us an action-packed start.
and that continued for the whole race. In today's Formation Lap, we'll discuss Sergio Perez's double retirement, how it was possible, and why we'll probably never see it happen again.
In the Grand Prix segment, I go over some of the dramatic history and savage comments shared between the F1 drivers in the 1990s.
And at the checkered flag, a special guest, Ian Shea of the Around the Outside, the American F1 podcast, joins us to discuss the latest Formula One headlines.
Let's get into it. So the Japanese Grand Prix happened this weekend.
It did.
Sans rain, which was... It almost felt wrong, truly.
Yeah.
It almost felt wrong.
Felt weird.
Yes, but Cristina, what are we going to talk about today in the Formation Lap?
Oh, well, the big pondering thought, I think, for most people after this race weekend was, what the heck? How did Red Bull have a double DNF and yet Max still won? Because Checo, lo and behold, out of all the like magical, mystical, record-breaking things that Red Bull are doing this season, somehow added retiring twice from a race to that list. Like, very record-breaking season.
I will be honest with you. I genuinely thought there was a rule. And I'm just guessing. I thought that there was a rule that when you declare DNF, that you can't come back. You would think that rule would exist.
You would think, but the nitpicky of it is that if the FIA take control of your car, you can't get it back. So that's why so many of the on-track DNFs are DNFs, like firm ones, is that the FIA have taken the car or somebody else other than a team member has touched the car. But there's nothing saying that if the driver and or team members are the ones who have touched and repaired the car, no matter how many number of laps down you are, there's nothing stopping them from rejoining the race and using it as a test session. And that's what we see most frequently, is that people, they get their car damaged and it takes 5-6 laps for them to fix it, but they can use it for experience. Like with rookies, it makes sense. With the McLaren earlier this year, they used it for Lando Norris. He kept going in and out of the pits because the car wasn't in a racing condition, but it was drivable. So they were using it as a test session, which they needed at the time. Thankfully, they don't anymore. But long story short, there was just no rule of declaring your DNF when it's in the pits. It was just, you have chosen to remove your car from the race, and it gets classified as being DNF because you didn't do 90% of the laps. Mm-hmm. There's no rule governing you and your team returning your car to the track, which is wild.
So crazy.
And I think the part which, fair enough, for most people that makes it seem kind of sketchy, is that the reason they brought him back onto track was to serve that penalty. Mm-hmm. Because for anybody who's unaware, if you don't serve your penalty because you retired, the stewards can elect, it's not an automatic thing, but they can elect to have it carry over to the next race. But in that case, it would not be a 5-second, it would get transformed into a grid drop.
Oh.
Which hurts more.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, the regulation, it doesn't say how many, it's one of those ambiguous, the stewards may do this. The specific wording is if any of the 4 penalties above being the 5-second, 10-second drive-through, stop and go, are imposed upon a driver and that driver is unable to serve the penalty due to retirement from the sprint or the race, the stewards may impose a grid penalty on the driver at his next race. So Red Bull didn't want to risk having Checo have a grid drop. They didn't want to risk it being, however many grid spots was decided. And we're at the point of the season as well where teams sometimes have grid drops because of replacing over their allotted amount of power unit components. So it might just be as well that they're looking ahead and being like, oh, shoot, we might at Qatar have to use power units anyway. That might also be part of the brain play. And again, the big delay as well was them debating and figuring this out. That's why it took so many laps for Checo to get back out. It was A, replacing the car, but also B, they did check with the stewards and kind of went like, hey, the way it looks to us, this is kosher, this is okay. Is that how it looks like to you guys? So they did do everything above board. This wasn't them being sketchy. This was them being like, so the rules don't say we can't. So we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
And now, again, they're looking at closing that loophole because it just does make sense to say, you know, once you've damaged your car to the point of it being so damaged that you're not participating in this race. And that's my big question is when they say close this loophole, do they mean the penalty loophole where you're not participating in the race anyway, but you're just going out to serve your penalty, even though it's not actually going to have any consequence? It's not going to have an impact. Or do they mean close the loophole as in you have retired your car and you can no longer return to track?
I feel like it should be the second one. If they're asking me, it should be the second one, because if you try to make it, but the other thing is then if you make it the second one, you have to be specific in what does DNF mean? Because sometimes we'll see 35-second pit stops because they're replacing a front wing and they lost the tire, or this tire had a puncture, they had to get another tire, whatever. So you can't make it if the car is unavailable to return to track for X amount of time. I think they should do it by laps. Like
that's my thought as well.
Yeah.
How many laps down are you? Is it an automatic like meatball or black and white flag kind of a thing? Yeah. Because that's the other thing where most DNFs are literally just the teams being like, this car can't stay on track. We will get a meatball, which is the flag that the stewards and race control can put out there if your car is unsafe to drive, and they can make it be pulled off. But Checo's car had time to be repaired,
which is crazy.
Like,
that's crazy. You shouldn't be allowed to repair an entire car on the heels of him being on his third front wing of the race. So many wings. Like you also, I asked myself, I said, aren't they only allowed like 2 or something? Like, isn't there a rule that they're only allowed a certain number of front wings? I feel like I remember reading that, and it could be 3. So homeboy could have gone through all of his front wings and had no more options. But yeah, it was crazy.
It really was. Like, some of the mistakes he made were just kind of appalling to see. Like, just so bad.
But granted, he wasn't the only one that was making mistakes this weekend. I don't want to sound like it's like a pile-on Checo. There were plenty of mistakes made this weekend by plenty of drivers. And plenty of really, really close calls. Like there was the really close call between George and Lewis on that long straight, which was crazy. The really close. I do not understand how neither McLaren got damage at the race start. It's still baffling me. I don't know how it happened.
I need to go and watch those onboards because I feel like that would just be very satisfying of watching. And okay, I really need them, not need, but I would love for F1 to also have, I know they have 1,000,001 camera angles and it's fabulous. They're adding more. We got to see that one on top of the roll hoop or next to the roll hoop on Lewis's car, which is really cool. But I really have gotten used to seeing the IndyCar 360 cameras.
Yeah.
Where they can actively pivot you around. I would love for F1 to bring those in because that'd be so satisfying to watch.
That would be interesting. That would be super
really
interesting.
Good.
Yeah. But I also thought it was interesting that we got a safety car because of damage on track. Because I'm so used to getting a safety car because somebody's stuck or somebody's crashed. But I thought that was interesting that there was so much damage that it created a safety car. So
just a debris field. It was that first lap was just like it was crazy. Perfect explosion of car bits and bobs. Like that was just it kind of looked like a piñata had been smashed. Like it looked like the Williams was a piñata. It did. Just candy everywhere.
And then at one point K-Mag was turned completely around.
Yeah,
that honestly, yes. When that happened, that scared me because I had the thought someone could come
around the corner,
straight around the corner, and just nail right into him. I mean,
Yeah.
I was actually really scared when it initially happened because I was like, he's just a sitting duck. He's that's terrible. But it was fine. Everything was fine. Thank goodness.
Yes. Some of the barriers are as close as some street circuits.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's right there. Like,
Well, and imagine if it had been raining on top of it all.
yep.
It was already
Like-
crazy. Anything else to speak on Checo's wonderful reemergence and then exit?
There's nothing much to say because there just isn't a rule that says anything about that situation, which is wild, but
I think that
it's,
there will be.
Yeah, there definitely will be now. It's
feel
like,
like
why
every
was this
year-
rule? That one kid,
Yes.
that ruins it for everyone.
Well, it was how we ended up with the safety car restart rule where you can't be alongside anymore.
Yep.
I feel like it's just Red Bull has their ticks that they have to tick every year, and they ticked constructors this weekend, but they also ticked make the FIA make up a new rule for one of your drivers. I think it's got to be a part of their MO,
Their
or
bucket
whatever it's called.
list.
Yes, their bingo card, if you will.
Bingo. I made a bingo card at the beginning of this season. I have not
How's it
looked at
looking?
I haven't
Yeah.
looked at it in like months. I forgot it was there. I should take a peek at that. Oy vey. But that has been the formation lap.
For today's Grand Prix segment, I feel like I got so excited about all of the stories that have happened in Japan that I told myself I wasn't going to tell a lot of them, but I feel like my notes are so long.
Oh my
So
goodness.
buckle up, people. We're about to talk about Japan for a hot minute.
Oh,
So- Yes, as we usually do today on the Grand Prix segment, we'll be looking at a little bit of history in Japan. I'm not going to go into all of it. For those who know a little bit about their history in Japan, I'll just go ahead on the front end and say I'm not telling the Jules story today. It is not because I don't think it's important. I think it's very important. I think that it's something that we're all very familiar with. And so I try to bring stories that maybe where people are less familiar with. But it does not mean that I am choosing to neglect it in any way. It was a horrible travesty, shouldn't have happened, and he's missed every day. All right, let's get into Japan. Historically, Japan has been one of the last races of the season, as we see now. Although I don't think it is next year.
It's not.
Next year, it's early.
Bumped up to the front of the line.
Yes. Very exciting to see it not in monsoon season. But because it's been at the end of the season, a lot of times, it has been the venue for a lot of title deciding races, as we saw last year with Max Verstappen, under some chaos. If you don't know anything about the chaos, go back and listen to our episode with Sean, because he does a really great job of explaining everything that happened. But actually in Japan, 13 World Drivers' Championships have been crowned over the 36 World Championship Japanese Grand Prix that have been hosted, which is crazy. So Japan was the only Asian nation to host a Formula One race until Malaysia joined in 1999. And then
Malaysia.
now we have, and we have Singapore now and China, which sadly didn't get to happen this year, but we'll be back. China will be back. Okay, so the first two Formula One Japanese Grand Prix in 1976 and 1977 actually were not held at Suzuka, which is, for those that don't know, where it was held this past weekend. It was held at the Fuji Speedway. And this was before Japan was taken off of the calendar. So it then returned in 1987 at Suzuka, which hosted the Grand Prix exclusively for 20 years and gained a reputation as one of the most challenging Formula One circuits. I think everybody that drove there this weekend would agree. The first Formula One Japanese Grand Prix in 1976 was held at the very fast 2.7 miles Fuji Speedway, minus the banking. The race was, it became famous for the title decider between James Hunt and Niki Lauda, as it was held during monsoon conditions. For those who may not know those names, there's a great movie, I think it's still available on Netflix, that literally tells the story of this season that I'm talking about. So I'll tell you guys kind of what happened, and it'll kind of spoil the movie a little bit, but still go watch it because Chris Hemsworth's in it. So you should go watch it.
And he's got
What's
like
it called?
flowing hair.
Rush. It's called Rush.
Yes.
Yes.
The blonde Flo Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth plays James Hunt. He does a great job. 10 out of 10 recommend. It's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. All right. It was held
Man,
during
both
monsoon.
of those guys were in the Avengers. The guy who plays James Hunt and
Niki Lauda. Yeah, honestly, the actor that plays Niki Lauda in it, I don't know his name. I wish I did. He does such a good job. He's really talented.
Like, my favorite Marvel villain is him.
He does a great job as a Marvel villain. But
so
honestly, he does so well as Niki Lauda. He does such a good job. It's crazy. So, anyways. It was held during monsoon conditions in Japan. Mind you, this is later in the season. So, bear in mind, Lauda had survived a near-fatal crash at the German Grand Prix earlier in the season, which when you watch the movie, you'll see what happened. He had to withdraw from the race, stating that his life was more important than the championship. And so did the Brazilians Emerson Fittipaldi and Carlos Pace. You might recognize the Fittipaldi name. It's a bit of a dynasty in Formula One. The torrential rain in Japan, fast forward, we're in Japan, it eventually stopped. And after a slow pit stop that put him down to 5th, James Hunt drove really hard, climbed up to 3rd, taking the 4 points he needed to win the title by the slender margin of 1 point over Lauda. Mind you, Lauda had pulled out of the race. So if he had raced, who knows what would have happened, but that year James Hunt won. He didn't win the race. He won the championship. American Mario Andretti, who might be a familiar name as well, actually won that race for his second career win and first for Lotus, ahead of Patrick Depailler in the Tyrrell P34. So Hunt returned the year after to win the second Japanese Grand Prix, but a collision between Gilles Villeneuve, did I say it right, Cristina?
No.
No.
It's a soft G, so it's Gilles.
Gilles Villeneuve. Thank you so much.
There we go.
Our resident French woman.
You're
and
almost ready for your baguette.
Ronnie Peterson, which is not French, during the race, saw Villeneuve's Ferrari somersault into a restricted area, killing 2 spectators. We have talked before about how dangerous this sport is. It is nothing compared to how dangerous it used to be a spectator. It's crazy.
Wild.
It's crazy. Although originally this Grand Prix was scheduled for an April slot in the 1978 season, it was then canceled. The race did not reappear on the Formula One calendar for another decade, and it did not return to Fuji for an even greater time. I'll explain why later. The Japanese Grand Prix was originally scheduled for April 7th, 1985, but was canceled as rebuilding parts of the Suzuka circuit were too time-consuming. So on Formula One's return to Japan in 1987, the Grand Prix found a new venue at the redesigned and revamped Suzuka circuit that we know and love. My research says that it was set inside of a fun fair, that Suzuka was set inside of a fun fair, designed by Dutchman John Hugenholtz and owned by Honda, who used it as a test track. I also think it's worth noting that it was also placed in between 2 rice paddy fields. So when you see the flooding that you see at Suzuka, it's maybe because rice fields are meant to hold water. So the local terrain is meant to hold water. And they said, here is where we will build our circuit. I was like, great plan, everybody.
So wild.
But most notably, the layout at Suzuka is the only figure 8 track to appear on the F1 calendar.
We love it.
We do love it. It's so cool. And mind you, for those that don't know, no, the figure 8 does not overlap itself. So you're not going to deal with T-boning issues. You might ask yourself, a figure 8, how have they never T-boned each other? Because it goes over, people. We'll just take care of it now. It goes over and under. But that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the Japanese Grand Prix, the circuit there at Suzuka, became very popular among the drivers and fans because it was so demanding and so fast. And it went on to see some of the most dramatic and memorable moments in Formula One history. So the first event in 1987, it was already a classic. It saw another world title decided as Nigel Mansell crashed his Williams Honda heavily in practice and consequently could not start the race. So it handed the title to his teammate, Nelson Piquet, another name you might recognize from the great history here in Formula One. I'm telling you guys, I had such a hard time trying to narrow down the stories to tell you because there's so many amazing historic drivers to tell you about that have decided their titles here in Japan. It's insane. And that was Nelson Piquet's third and final title of his career that he won in Japan. But the story I'm really excited to tell you guys about from Japan are between two drivers who have not been previously mentioned, but are greats among the sport, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. They have been known to have some epic battles at Suzuka, and we don't have the time in this year's episode to get into it all, so look forward to next year. We'll debrief it all. But to briefly recap it, they were at each other's throats in 1988, 1989, and 1990 at Suzuka as they were battling for the championship at this historically rainy circuit. So they were teammates at McLaren in 1988, but by 1990, Prost was driving for Ferrari. So to me, the final battle in 1990 was particularly controversial because of the animosity that had been bubbling up for the 3 years at this point. And since they were formerly teammates. So Senna, we're going to talk about 1990. We're not going to even get into, well, I'll briefly mention some of the things that happened in 89 and 88, but it really, I mean, it was crazy in 1990. All right, so Senna and Prost were once again first and second in the championship. The two men had won 37 of the past 46 Formula One championship races between the two of them. It's crazy. So the roles had been reversed from the year prior. The championship situation for Prost was the same as Senna's in 1989. So you saw this kind of switch flip situation in 1990. Prost needed to win both of the final two races of the season to defend the title, one of which was Japan. The race also was without defending champion Nannini, as his career had ended just days after a helicopter crash. I felt like that needed to be said. We remember you, Nannini. You will live on in our hearts. Senna qualified for the Japanese Grand Prix on pole position, 0.3 ahead of Prost, now driving for Ferrari, who had the next most competitive package that year behind McLaren. Senna requested to change the grid positions in order to move pole position to the cleaner left side of the track where the racing line was, which I just need to note, that would like never happen today. You would never see the FIA allowing the pole position holder to be like, can we actually move pole? Can we switch everybody? Can we just trade everybody to help me since I'm P1? No chance. Well, it was initially granted, and they said, sure, we'll switch it for you. But Balestre intervened and reverted the grid positions back to their original location, meaning pole position would now be on the dirty right side of the track where all the bits of tire rubber had been thrown off by the tires thus far. If you don't know what that means, for it to be on the dirty side of the track. So this meant that Senna was off the racing line, and it would be more difficult for him to make a better start. Frustrated and angry, Senna mimicked Prost's statement from the previous year, which I'm just going to stop here saying these guys are so sassy. Like, you think they're sassy and savage today. They're over here trading the same insults towards each other that they had been giving each other the year prior. And I love it. But Senna mimicked Prost's statement from the previous year, saying he would not move over if Prost attempted to overtake him in the first corner. He was like, no, I'm not going to move over. Because he said he was going to move over for me. So, Mom, what you going to do about it? So, Senna started from pole with Prost second. But now Prost is on the racing line. And Prost got ahead of Senna at the start. But the more powerful Honda engine in Senna's McLaren meant that he was able to make up a bit of ground. Prost moved over to take the racing line, but Senna dived into the corner to Prost's right to pass him. And as a result, he hit the side of Prost's Ferrari. You can imagine it went over really well.
Whoop.
Both cars went straight on, and both drivers sped through the gravel trap at 160 miles per hour for our European friends. That's 260 kilometers per hour. And crashed into the tire wall at the end of the runoff area. They're both out.
Whoops.
Senna and Prost were both unhurt. Thank goodness. Neither driver bothered to check to see if the other one survived.
Oh,
they said,
jeez.
peace out, A-Town.
Well.
So this accident meant that Senna won his second World Drivers' Championship and ruined it for Prost. The crash was under a lot of speculation because it looked somewhat dubious and nothing was done to Senna by the FIA. Because, and you know how the FIA loves a precedent, they had done nothing to Prost the year prior for crashing into Senna.
Yeah.
So they were like, well, we didn't do anything to Prost last year, so we're not going to do anything to Senna this year. It was declared a racing incident, or as Charles Leclerc, a racing incident in the end.
Oh, yeah,
Furious. Oh, I love this little quote. Furious and disgusted, Prost later described Senna as, quote, a man without value.
Ooh.
End quote. Just cut to the bone.
Burn.
Yeah, cut to the bone. I mean, I'm telling you, it's crazy. Both drivers have been accused of crashing into the other deliberately, and thus the two situations, as well as their comments after, have tainted, unfortunately, they tainted both drivers' reputations in the eyes of most of their diehard fans. But Benetton driver Nelson Piquet won his first race in 3 years after someone else crashed, went off, and Nigel Mansell's Ferrari failed in the pits, and whatever. Piquet's new teammate finished second. So it was a great day for Benetton. It was not a great day for Prost and Senna. Actually, it was a great day for Senna. What am I saying? He won the Drivers' Championship. So fast forward, we're now looking at the early 2000s. But the Japanese Grand Prix was supposed to return to the Fuji circuit, interestingly enough, in 2009 and alternate between Fuji and Suzuka every year. But for financial reasons, it was announced that in 2010, it would remain only at Suzuka. That's why you see it at Suzuka today. But mind you, this Prost and Senna insanity also was happening at Suzuka. So I think they should keep going to Japan forever because clearly the fun stuff happens in Japan. Today, for our checkered flag segment, we are so thrilled to be welcoming a guest. Buck could not be with us today, and he is dearly missed. But with us is Ian Shea. We're so thrilled to have you, Ian. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is a pleasure to spend time with you both. It's been quite some time since we've spoken. How you all been?
So good.
So tired.
We just got back from Vegas, so we are in our pajamas and happy about it.
Still got that Vegas feeling in you? Just a little tired from it?
Yes.
Just a bit.
My lips are chapped from the dry air. Still recovering.
Gosh, yeah.
It's fine.
Did you guys get to see the track to talk over? You guys, did you see the track at all under construction?
Sort of.
Saw like a corner.
That's it?
We drove through an intersection that had very evident
repaving.
Formula One construction happening. So it wasn't the strip, but we're under the impression, and we have to check the exact layout of the pig and like where it's going, the pig being the shape of the track, but just need to double check. I think we were just at one of the corners that isn't the strip, but that is the race track.
Yes. But Ian, how are things on your side with your podcast? Let's plug your podcast here on our podcast. Tell the people about it.
Round the Outside, the American Formula One podcast, is doing quite well, actually, with Mike and I, because we had to, the beginning, we did a host change, and it's Mike and myself now, and he has recently received a baby. His wife had a baby, their first child, Julian.
So exciting.
Yeah, he's like
Little
a month.
nugget.
He's got a month old or 2 months old now. So he would just be like, Ian, I'm so tired. I can't record. It's like, be a father first. We'll get through this. So it's been that's really what's been going on most, just checking in with Mike, and he's just taking care of his son. And we were able to connect last night and talk about Japan as well. So no.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm super happy for him, and I'll just ask him because I don't have kids, and like no one's come knocking. So I just go, Mike, like, how is it today? And he's like, it's going.
Oh.
So,
Well, Ian, what are you going to be doing for us here today for the checkered flag?
well, there were two things I wanted to talk about. One of which, or two of them, which actually, that we talked about on our podcast, but I was just curious because you guys just have such insightful opinions. I wanted to know what you thought. And the first one is connected to Japan. During the race, I thought there was 3 instances of team orders where normally there isn't. It was with McLaren, and then at the end with Gasly, and then also with Mercedes pulling Lewis in to within range of Carlos Sainz because I thought Russell's tires were dead. What do you both think is, the stopping line for team orders? Because it seems to provide more confusion than just outright racing. On my side, what do you guys think?
I'll let Cristina go first. You go, girl.
See, in my mind, because we have a team championship, you do have to let them have team orders. They are competing, not just how many can we get for these individual drivers. They're competing to see between these 2 drivers, how many can we get compared to others. Mm-hmm. So you do have to let them play that team game. And at the end of the day, if the communication isn't clear, that's their problem. That is something that they have to deal with. And if they screw themselves over, that's a lesson to be learned at the end of the day. Like, in my opinion, that was the problem with Alpine, is that they communicated clearly to Ocon what was going to happen, but not to Gasly. And that's a huge issue. And that's going to cost them at the end of the day because they're going to have teammates that aren't as happy, aren't as willing to work with each other, who might pull a Max Verstappen and just be like, I'm not doing that. I told you I wouldn't do that, and I'm not going to do it. So it's part of managing a team is communication, and also just ensuring that everybody feels like they are being heard and that everything is equally happening. Like if for whatever situation you have one driver that's always being pulled to the front, why is that happening? And with a team like Mercedes at this point in the year, it absolutely makes sense. You have Lewis that's actually within striking distance of that second place for the world drivers. So yes, prioritize him. But with Alpine, in my mind, that one didn't make any sense because it actually puts Gasly farther away from getting ahead of Stroll in the Drivers' Championship. So I have no issue with team orders. It's part of the game, and those who play it well benefit, and those who don't become memes.
It's true. Yeah, I'm pro team orders. I think that because it is a team sport in so many ways, and these drivers at the end of the day are employees of the team, they are required then to follow team orders, just like everybody else. When the team principal tells the mechanics to get the car ready, that's not really up for debate. Those are team orders as well. So team orders don't just apply to the drivers in a corporate sense. However, I think team orders can become problematic on the teams that do not clearly define driver 1 and driver 2. And so every driver, especially if they're on a team that does not define driver 1 or driver 2, every driver thinks they're driver 1. If you asked me who was driver 1 at Mercedes, no question, it's Lewis Hamilton. If you asked really anybody in the world, there's no question that it's Lewis Hamilton. But if you ask George Russell, he would say it's George Russell. So I think that's where it starts to become problematic. And you see some of these race engineers and team principals becoming guidance counselors more than team principals in these moments. Because I think back to, something that Toto said to George, it was either earlier this season or last season, where he was like, get over it. Put your head down, keep racing. Because emotions are high. Everybody wants to get points. Everybody wants to do well. But sometimes for the sake of the team, you have to take team orders. And they all want to preserve their racing mentality that they are racers. And you're only there if you believe you're the best. And that's the truth. However, there's so much more at play. So you have to take team orders into account. I think that I agree with Cristina about the Alpine one not really making much sense. I actually think it's harder for McLaren because Lando and Oscar are so evenly matched.
And it's only going to get worse with Oscar gaining experience.
Yes. And so they have a beautiful problem on their hands. They have two incredible drivers and a fast car. What do you do? And the incentive that Lando's never won. And they really want to get Lando a win.
A win.
And I think it would be really hard for Lando if Oscar won in the McLaren before he did. But I think it'd be really hard for Oscar if he was held back from his first ever win in Formula One because Lando's been there longer. So I actually think McLaren's going to have a bit of a harder time, but we'll see how the future unfolds.
Yep. And last thing as well, even if you don't have a distinct number 1 and number 2 driver, or if you do, sometimes during a particular race, you have to change things.
Yes.
And that's okay. It is better to make a call of who to prioritize than to have both of your drivers crash out. As a team principal, like that would be like where the hammer drops. Is it's like you two are not crashing into each other. Priorities right here. You do not race against each other until I tell you you can. Like that's the other helpful thing about team orders is you can preserve things and keep things a lot more civil.
For the sake of the team.
Yes.
For the sake of the team. So,
absolutely.
10 out of 10. Ian, what do you think? Do you think
Let them race.
team orders are good or bad?
Let them race. I just want to see rivalries bubble up. I want to see inter-team rivalries. I want to see something implode on track because
I love it.
like given the McLaren situation, let's say Oscar is in front and Lando's the quicker and the team says hold positions. I want to see him snap and just be like, no, I did it for Danny. I'm taking this win from this kid. Like I just, you know,
Feral Lando would be a thing to behold.
And I think the Lando of today absolutely is going to hunt it down because I think when it happened with Daniel, I think that they had hope that next time around it'll be you, and there wasn't a next time around. And Lando's learned that lesson, and he's like, there will be no next time around. So we'll see. But I don't think Oscar's going to go quietly. I think Oscar's going to want it too. So.
And Lando's just been an absolute monster in the updated McLaren, which has been fantastic.
Just
16-second lead over his teammate. He had a Max Verstappen gap. I mean, granted, Max had...
He pulled it.
Yeah.
Max also had a Max Verstappen gap.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, he pulled a heck of a lead out on him. So I think that that's why I want to see the faster driver instead of saying I'm faster, let me by. Just be the faster driver. So do you guys think Logan and Stroll will have a seat in 2024?
Oh, Ian, you're asking such controversial questions here on Gravel Trap today.
I don't mean to. It's just things that I've been seeing. I don't want Logan. I want Logan to have another chance, and I've supported Stroll in the past, and I've supported Logan, so I'm grasping for straws to find reason to keep them on. But it's getting harder and harder for me to come up with reasons. Are you guys finding yourself having a hard time reasoning their seats in the sport?
Logan, I feel like it makes sense to me to give him a second year, primarily because he's a Williams Academy driver. He was supposed to get that second year in F2. So it's just like, this is the bed. You made it. You created this situation. You weren't able to find another driver to give Logan more time to develop. This is a problem you have created and you get to deal with. Like, that is it at the end of the day. The only thing that I could see being the issue is it's not just up to James Vowles. They do have to be accountable to people who are giving the money. And so it might be that trickle-down effect where it's like, this kid is crashing too many cars. That is too big of a problem at this point. No. So that's where it could be. I do think he should get a second year. It's getting really hard to watch, though, because you can tell he's being so hard on himself. And again, it's not a problem that he necessarily created. He was just brought up to Formula One before his developmental program was done. It's really hard to watch because you just know that if he had come in at a different year with that one more year of experience, we'd be having very different conversations. He probably would have just been a rookie that you check in on every couple of races being like, yep, solid race. Yep, good learning curve. Cool. Instead, right now, he's being constantly beaten down because of all of the negative press he's getting, which can't make getting better any easier. Like, the mental game for him has got to be so hard right now. And as for Stroll, in my mind, it is just eventually going to be time for him to think, should I go do something else? He's a midfield driver.
Yep.
And he's had a very average midfield driver career, which has lasted longer, I feel like, than most midfielders. Like, you give them 5-6-ish years and he's at 8 at this point. So he's not going to accomplish much more. He's had a very respectable career for a midfield driver. I do think at a certain point within the next like year or two, it does have to be a discussion of like, you've gotten everything you're going to get out of this. It is time for you to go. And like his dad is going to be the one that has to pull the plug on that. So,
poor kid.
You know, parents have to have those tough conversations with their kids. It's the reality of it. And yeah, that'll be, with Stroll, I do just think it's getting to be time. He's not going to do much else.
Yeah. I think with Logan, to go back to Logan, it also doesn't help that the person whose seat he's taking was known for doing a lot of crashing. And so Williams' reputation and the way their drivers are already seen was already kind of in a tough spot anyway. And then for him to come in a little bit underdeveloped where he was being scrutinized so much closer than even Oscar was, or, you know, really anybody else that was coming in for the first time, or Nick DeVries. And like, look how it worked out for Nick. But I think that he was being watched so closely that didn't help either. I think that James Vowles, well, here's the thing. I think that if Logan was in a Red Bull system, he would have been gone a long time ago.
Oh, 100%.
But I think James Vowles, having been trained in the Mercedes system, I think that they should give Logan another year or two. And I think that they will, because James has openly said that Logan is learning every day. And he's also learning a new car that is in the middle of being developed. Alex has been a part of the development since they really started taking this thing by the reins. Logan's coming in the middle and is expected to just know everything that they're in the middle of developing. And so I don't think it's fair to compare them. On the surface, it's really easy to be like, Logan, what are you doing here? But I want to see him do better. I have hope for him. For Lance, I actually think it's, like Cristina said, it's not up to Lance. However, I think that Lawrence Stroll needs to ask himself, does he want to win championships or does he want his son to drive? Because I don't think you're going to get both. He wants both, and he's doing everything he can to get both. But once again, scoreboard. Like,
yeah,
the massive discrepancy between the two cannot be ignored. I think that Lance is going to be successful in whatever he goes on to do. I think he has the foundation to be successful in a lot of things. But I also think that this is what he wants to do. And as long as the money speaks for him, he'll be in it. And I think it's also worth saying, he's not a disgrace. Like, I don't want to be like, Lance is the worst on the grid, he needs to go. Like, he's not causing crashes. He's not causing life-threatening situations. Like Cristina said, he's in the midfield. I think that when he podiumed in his rookie season, everyone was like, oh my gosh, so much potential. Ian, what do you think?
I think Lance is going to be out. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have it. He's so good in the wet too. Like, I put him in the top 5 drivers when it's wet out, and this downturn in form is just awful to see. And I think it's mentally speaking, he's done. Ever since the injury, too, from the beginning of the season, I don't foresee him. I mean, I'll be surprised if he's in 2024 with Logan. I got to root for the American just out of sheer bliss or ignorance, whatever it is at this point. So I want him to continue on because I think what it still impresses me, though, is just driving one lap in a Formula One car. A normal person can't. Like, if someone put me in a Formula One car, I don't think I could get it out of gear. Like, I'm going to be honest
100%.
with myself. And then even if I got it out of gear, I wouldn't hit the brakes hot enough because I wouldn't be going fast enough, so the tires would be cold, and then I'd go straight off. So the fact that this, what is he, like 19, 20 too? Isn't he young? Isn't he a young kid?
Lance?
He's young,
Logan.
yeah. Logan.
Oh, Logan. Yeah, Logan's really young. He's 22.
All right, so in the States, you get your license at, 16? So technically he's only been driving legally for 6 years, if you want to put it that way. So give the kid another try. I want to see him keep the American in the sport.
No, he's a December 31st, 2000. So he's like the end of the year.
So he'll turn 23 like on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
What a cutie.
Like, yeah, he's a late birthday, just under the wire. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode of Gravel Trap F1, where we were talking about all things Japanese Grand Prix, and we had a wonderful guest, Ian Shea, join us for the Checkered Flag. If you get some time, go check out his podcast called
Around the Outside, the American Formula One podcast.
Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Meow. We have to write our own intro this time. Buck always writes the intro for us, but now we have to write it. Wait, Ian, did you write it?
I didn't write an intro. I didn't write.
Christina,
Yeah.
Buck was looking out for us. Look at the intro.
There's one already? Oh my gosh.
He pre-wrote 3/4 of an intro for us with gaps for us to put in whatever actually happened in this episode because he knows that we go off topic all the time.
What a hero. Oh my gosh.
What
Oh,
a
geez.
gem of a human.